Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With us today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you today.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. How are you this morning?
I'm doing well, and I want to find out from you, do we have a speaker yet? How can we live without a speaker?
They elected you while you were sleeping.
Yeah, oh, wonderful. Adjourn.
Adjourn.
I resign. Oh, my. It's in a way, it's sort of sad and tragic because it demonstrates where the country is. You know, they can't even get together and have a little congressional session to spend more money. But then again, maybe this is a true reflection of what's really going on. Although it's not the first time it ever happened in history. They get frustrated. But right now, I would say, how many days have they been into this? About 3 days or so, and having a bunch of little votes. But it looks like things aren't getting better for McCarthy. It looks like he's struggling. And I don't think anybody really knows what the final outcome will be. Of course, I don't worry a whole lot about it. I'm concerned about it. I would like to see things better. But I think this mess that we're in is so bad that Congress, we don't need the Congress there. Who knows? We might be better off with it. And then when we talk a little bit more about exactly what's going on with the Twitter files, it really adds fuel to the fire of ineptness and not knowing what's going on. And there's some good news in that. I think the Twitter files has some good news, and they're doing a good job on that. So Musk, I think, has done us all a favor, and the files have exposed a lot of the corruption that we talk about. I mean, how many people, not besides us, have talked about the deep state and who really runs things? This is an exposure on how it works, the mechanisms of it, how big corporations get together with the government agencies of the government to go and run things, and they have, and is very much abused. But unfortunately, as much as this is a benefit, I'm afraid the guilty parties, all the way back to even before 2016, all the corruption in the elections, everything else, I don't think anybody's going to be punished for it.
Yeah, I don't think so. Well, as it stands right now, and we were talking about the show, that the vote was supposed to start as we started the show, and we didn't even want to announce it because we don't want anyone to tune over to the vote. So stay here if you're with us. But let's put up that first clip, because this is from Zero Hedge, and they're watching it in real time. This was just about a half an hour ago. Total chaos. McCarthy and allies want to adjourn the House and postpone the Speaker vote. And that is because Dr. Paul, after losing 3 votes yesterday in agony, hanging out there to dry, as not only did he win some votes over, he actually lost a vote. There are now 20 who refused to vote, 20 Republicans who refused to vote for him for Speaker, and it seems like it's getting worse, particularly as he looks weaker and weaker as he's hung out to dry. So it looks like what they might be trying to do, according to what Zero Hedge is reporting, is they want to just go ahead and postpone the vote until tomorrow maybe. They want to adjourn the House, but the problem is complicated by the fact that they may not have enough votes to even adjourn the House. So they can't even leave, they can't even go home. They may be forced to do a 4th vote, which he will probably lose, and it will make it look even worse. So really there's blood in the water, and it's being sensed by a lot of conservative sharks, I think, out there.
But McCarthy has to be an optimist. I mean, he's already moved in the office. He has his desk in there and everything.
Exactly.
I wonder if he'll, and he doesn't have to worry if he has to move out. He'll have a lot of help.
Yeah,
a lot of
sure.
people, Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
Get out and do it. But for me, I see this as so symbolic of what's happening to the country and to the economy, to our civil liberties, to our foreign policy. And the bankruptcy, the moral bankruptcy and the financial bankruptcy makes it difficult to manage, and we're running into that. I think I think you could take what we see in the politics of what's going on right now and compare that to the Federal Reserve deciding what to do with monetary policy and what they expect next week and 2 weeks later and what the interest rates should be, because that's foolish nonsense, but of a much greater significance. It almost distracts from the big things: war and economic prosperity and the Federal Reserve and spending money and debt. And this is not a philosophical argument that they're having. This is sort of strategic, it's partisan type stuff, and there's other things going on. Power, who gets to be on what committees, who raised the most money in the past.
Yeah.
They have a big job sorting all that out.
Yeah. And I think what was interesting, and that I also did not realize, I think what's happening right now shows how deep the rebellion really was within the party. Now, this goes to what you've always said: you don't need a majority. There's only 20 members right now on the Republican side, the Republican caucus, that are holding up his election as a speakership. They struck at the right time. And I think, you and I have watched the drift over the past, 10 or so years since you've been out, the drift away from any individual member having any power whatsoever, the drift toward throwing everything into an omnibus at the end of the year and saying vote or die on it. We've seen how it's just sort of devolved into basically a circus or a zoo. But now we're seeing how deep and how serious some of these members are about the problems that were there. And I think for them, McCarthy has come to symbolize that problem. He is a symbol of what's happened over the Pelosi years, the fact that he's made so many deals with Pelosi that they have done nothing to really articulate. And we've talked about this before too. We compared it to '94 when they had a specific agenda articulated. This is what we're going to do if you elect us. McCarthy had nothing of the sort, but now we're seeing, in the absence of him articulating a vision, we're seeing these 20 members, the rebels, coming in and articulating a vision. Turns out that there really was a vision out there, but it just wasn't from McCarthy.
Yes, I think it's a great symbolic effort, but it's not going to get anyway. I've been thinking about our very good friend and ally, philosophically and personally, and that's Thomas Massey.
Yeah.
And and I was looked to see if his name's in that 20. You think, well, he's a real rebel,
Yeah.
but he's a philosophic rebel.
Yeah.
And I think I understand, but I haven't had a conversation with him in a while, so we haven't shared ideas. But in a way, he's a rebel, but he wants to defend the things that we want to defend. The libertarian beliefs, free markets, and all these things, and anti-war, and he's a supporter right now of
McCarthy. He voted for him. Yeah, he did.
Yeah. So does that mean that he's wimped out? So, but when they talk about the evil words that the Republicans are using against other Republicans for not supporting McCarthy, that in a way, I think that Thomas has risen above that.
Yes.
He's not in this squabbling business, but I know where he stands. And the other day I made a point that if somebody decided to do it and vote for Kevin, that it would be that would mean that Jordan would be in charge of the committee, Judiciary Committee.
Yeah.
And that in itself, he may have a more powerful voice there than he would as a speaker. So I don't know. I think anyway, I just mentioned that because he is a good friend. And if we had him on our program, we could ask him about how things are going. But I don't want to bother him right now.
He's a little busy. Yeah.
He's probably voting at this very moment.
Could be. I think we did make it clear yesterday that we're not endorsing this fight necessarily, and you may have actually voted for McCarthy because this isn't the battle, this isn't the hill to die on. So definitely I think a very good argument can be made, and maybe if we know Mr. Massey as well as we think we do, he would make that argument, this is not the hill to die on. And so I don't think there should be any question about his dedication to his principles, as you say, based on this vote. Nevertheless, it is fascinating, and I haven't been this interested in Congress, to be honest, since we left, because I actually watched a vote for the first time in a long time yesterday. But I wanted to just mention a couple things about McCarthy, because as we say, he's looking weaker and weaker. He's handling it so badly. Let's put this next one up, because this is from Politico, and it really kind of says it all. after another failed vote, McCarthy's speaker bid is starting to look pathetic. Now that is the worst thing, you know, Dr. Paul, in politics. You can do all sorts of things, but you don't want to look pathetic. And that is really dangerous. And as you alluded to, and here's a letter that Matt Gaetz sent to the architect of the House. Put this up. This is, I'm sure, fairly tongue-in-cheek in its typical Matt Gaetz, very caustic in a way, but it's also very funny. He writes, and I'll leave it up here while I read it, please. He writes to the architect of the Capitol yesterday and says, "Dear Mr. Blanton, I write to inform you that the Speaker of the House office, located in the U.S. Capitol building, is currently occupied by Representative Kevin McCarthy. As of this morning, the 117th Congress adjourned sine die, and a Speaker from the 118th Congress has not been elected. After 3 undeciding votes, no member can lay claim to this office. What is the basis in law, House rule, or precedent to allow someone who was placed second in 3 successive Speaker elections to occupy the Speaker of the House office? How long will he remain there before he is considered a squatter? Please write back promptly, as it seems Mr. McCarthy can no longer be considered Speaker designate following today's balloting." Very funny, calls him a squatter.
Yeah, but maybe some people might not think it's funny. And maybe say, January 6th all over again.
Yeah.
Let's go get them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So somebody will want to do it.
But he has handled it badly. You know, he said something on the order of, well, hey, now it's my turn. It's my turn to be Speaker. You know, he moves into the office. He's not, according to what we've heard, been negotiating properly. He has not been giving any concessions to the other side, to the rebels, which would probably be painless. He has handled this with, what do you say, like in such a bad and such a haphazard way that he's just looking worse and worse.
Because the country is bankrupt, to bring people together is more difficult. So if you don't have a powerful figure that can bring them together for various reasons, then you run into this stalemate. But I don't see how McCarthy's going to work his way out of there today.
Yeah.
I think it'd be strange if they just don't. I don't know. They've had votes like this before, and sometimes they go on and on and on. But I wonder how many times they couldn't even vote to adjourn. That they couldn't even take a break.
Well, I have a video keyed up that I would mind showing you. It's of Chip Roy, and we both have some admiration for him. He's a very well spoken. I think he's thoughtful. I'm sure there are plenty of things we disagree with him on. But here he is on Laura Ingram's show, if you might want to put your earpiece in, Dr. Paul, talking about what they are complaining about in this. There's your earpiece right there.
It's not an ideological purity test. This isn't about Kevin, right? This is about all of the assertions being made by Kevin's camp. When I hear assertions that says, oh, they gave you everything you wanted. Well, Laura, hold on a second. What, 72 hours to read a bill? That's already the rule, and it gets waived. You know how it gets waived? Because the Rules Committee is chock full of a bunch of establishment people who say, oh, whatever we need to do to jam through the big spending bill that Mitch McConnell just sent to us. Look, when the leadership actually votes with the minority, votes with the Democrats, to steamroll Republicans, which is the past history of our Republican leadership, then maybe we should do something different.
Yeah, so that's his bill of particulars against McCarthy, and how he has worked with the Democrats to pass these horrible, massive bills without any Republican input. So it just shows that the level of mistrust is very, very strong out there. And I think I want to do a couple of quick things and throw it back to you, but this sort of, to me, symbolizes why people don't like McCarthy. Let's put this up. We talked about this at the time. He came out all big and strong during the campaign. There's going to be no blank check for Ukraine if we win the majority, and he was obviously appealing to the base, because we know the vast majority of the Republican base do not want any more money or weapons for Ukraine. We've talked about poll after poll showing that. So here he is playing the big tough guy about no aid, and then put on the next picture. And then next you see him on the House floor dressed like this. He's got his Ukrainian flag, and he has a Ukrainian kerchief in his pocket. And the Columbia Bugle, which is a great right-wing alternative publication, calls him Kievin McCarthy instead of Kevin McCarthy. So that just says in a nutshell what kind of politician I think he is.
I just had a radical thought. That could be construed as unpatriotic.
Yeah, right.
You know, that is just horrible. So anyway, well, I wanted to talk a little bit about the Twitter files too, because there's some very good news there. Things are being exposed. I've been fascinated with the principle and the mechanisms of coups, the takeover, because we're the experts. I imagine, I think I'm safe to say, the United States probably has, participated in more coups than any other country ever did. But I don't know. You know, the Roman Empire might have done something that was called a coup, but they just marched in and took over with his military. But a coup is a seductive way of taking over the government. And of course, the most recent coup that we've talked about was the coup in 2014, and the taking over of the government and kicking the government out that was elected that was favorable toward, a peaceful relationship with Russia. So there has been a coup, but it goes on and on. But the coup is harder to measure if it's not a precise military takeover and throwing the people out. And I think ours has been more subtle, gradual, and erosion of our liberties and the deep state taking over. Most people understand the word deep state, people who secretly control our government.
Yeah.
And I think that has gone on. But where it's become very, very annoying and prevalent, people trying to figure out, well, what's been going on, especially since 2016? Is there the radicalism that's associated with the social media, all that activity. And what happens here is now Taibbi has revealed with these release, which Muscat revealed, and it is bad. There is so much trash in there, and yet I don't think even now, as bad as it is, people are willing to challenge it on principle, because I don't think the founders would be upset if we had never started an FBI, and a CIA, and they're involved. But I think it's good that this is coming out, because truth is becoming more prevalent, and the people who are suspicious of things, have things to hang their hat on. So there's been a lot of information describing how the deep state and the coup has worked, and how the government and the FBI and the CIA works very, very strongly, with social media, and of course we've always known regular media, and it's such an incestuous situation there that it's going to take a lot of house cleaning to do this. But I don't know whether that's been even debated in the election of the. I doubt if anybody running for speaker right now say, well, what we want to do is take care of this FBI people so they're out of business.
And I do think some of the rebels have talked about that. Some of the 20 have talked about, we need to get to the bottom of this, and that's a great thing to do. And the reason we're talking about this, let's put this up, because as you say, Matt Taibbi had yet another edition of the Twitter files released yesterday. Actually, let's move forward to that Twitter. I think it's 2 or 3 ahead. Keep going if you can, One more. There we go. So he put this out yesterday, and it was a long thread, and you and I both wanted to talk about it, but we didn't want to have to unpack the entire thing because it is chock full of info, and the title page really tells everything. The Twitter files, how Twitter let the intelligence community in. And this is getting deeper and deeper, because we heard about the FBI's role. Now we're learning, as you say, about the deep state, the deeper state's role. Put on this next one, because Elon Musk himself commented on Matt Taibbi's release, and he points out this is basically skipping a cut to the chase. U.S. government agency demanded suspension of 250,000 accounts, including journalists and Canadian officials. And this, he's talking about the Global Engagement Center of the State Department, which literally sent over lists to Twitter saying, we want you to ban these 250,000 people. That is incredible. And Snowden chimed in on this. Let's put this next one up, because this is fascinating. Snowden points out, because what happened is the FBI set up a channel with Twitter for the purpose of censoring and kicking people off. Snowden comments, the U.S. government through the FBI had the censorship units at major internet platforms on speed dial. Public figures that claimed such a year ago were cast out of polite society as lunatics. When it is now established to be true, the same polite people now shrug, trust the ruler. And he did mention, I did put it up here, Dr. Paul, in a subsequent tweet, this feels a little bit like deja vu. Because remember, before all these revelations, anyone who said the NSA was spying on us was crazy conspiracy theorists. So it's very interesting.
And it's been so prevalent, dealing with Russia and China and in foreign policy. And we know that goes on in the coups that we participate in. But if we look at the last 3 years, especially about 2 years ago, it was social media working with the government that carried out the orders of the government to punish and cancel, who took over the First Amendment. It does, to me, represent that a lot of our control of government has been totally taken over, because it's evident now that they were in charge and they were taking orders, and it was one and the same. It wasn't like the government was alone and occasionally asking the social media to do such and such. They became partners. The social medias, they were researchers and probably getting paid a lot of money.
$3.5 million just for Twitter.
They get involved in policy. Oh, hey, we have a hot lead for you. It is very, very bad, and I think that it was a big problem. This is a big problem on how you control the social media. But one thing you could do, and they're moving in that direction, some people, you got to think about property rights and contracts with people, and it was never enforced or understood with the social media, and that's why everybody, including many libertarians, they throw up their hand. It's a private company.
Yeah.
We can't regulate that. Well, we don't want to regulate the First Amendment.
Yeah.
But if you don't understand this, you turn it loose, to the monsters who use that to start war and take over the world and spend us into bankruptcy and punish people who disagreed. This is the whole thing. The attack on the First Amendment is horrendous, and that's the favor I think Musk has given us, to just let us see this stuff.
See the scum. But there are so many bombshells. I'm sure that most of our viewers have read the thread, and if not, they should read it. It takes a while to digest, but I think one of the real bombshells here, and this says, I think, everything, was that Twitter was having a hard time because they were being pressured by the U.S. government to find Russian influencing accounts, Russian agent accounts, all of these sorts of things, because that was the narrative. Of course, the Russians were in our elections. The Russians had Russiagate. Trump was with the Russians. So there was tons and tons of pressure. Turns out a sitting member of the United States Senate, Senator Mark Warner, Democrat of Virginia, and this is from the Zero Hedge article, tried to force feed the Russian influence narrative down Twitter's throat, despite the fact that Twitter just wasn't seeing it. So Twitter is looking for these supposed Russian accounts, Russian agents, and it just wasn't finding it. And Warner starts pressuring them. You got to find some. You got to find some. So they wanted their conclusions to be backed, their narrative to be backed, regardless of whether it was true. And that is, I think, treasonous.
Yeah, it is. And getting that exposure now is much more likely than it has ever been in the last several years. But this has been going on for so long. When I was alerted to how serious this was a good time ago, because it had to do with the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
That sort of passed nearby me when I was at Kelly Air Force Base, and Kennedy was on the base, and the next day he was assassinated. But at that time, it got my attention. But it's been since then when the people who have done the detailed research really has explained all this. So this has been going on a long time. That the government has been undermined. It is probably more difficult to handle than if you had a military invasion. There's my target. They sent in 100,000 troops. we'll fight them and reverse the takeover. But this one is tougher because it's philosophic, it's incestuous, and they've done their work over these many years to get their people positioned in the low-level positions, and like in our school industry and all of these things, that they have so much control and control the businessman, and then the businessmen have done this too. But this is all this kind of thing. I mean, the people who have social media and mainstream media, they're supposed to be businessmen, but they're not. They're part of a corrupt government system.
Yeah, and it's amazing, even in Zero Hedge, of course, pulled this part out because it directly relates to them, and we're not surprised, but the State Department was flagging accounts to Twitter. And this is what happened. So Zero Hedge, if you remember, it was suspended from Twitter, was kicked off Twitter for a tweet they made speculating on the possibility of a Chinese origin in a lab, just speculating on it. They were kicked off. Put on that next clip, because this is what happened after they were kicked off for that. State, which is the State Department, the Global Engagement Center, GEC, State also flagged accounts that retweeted news that Twitter banned the popular U.S. Zero Hedge, claiming the episode, quote, led to another flurry of disinformation narratives. Zero Hedge had done reports speculating that the virus had lab origins. So the State Department is pouring through Twitter, telling Twitter to flagging accounts to be banned for just retweeting that Zero Hedge was banned itself. That shows how deep. That shows we've got about 40,000 too many employees at the State Department.
We've always been annoyed that the people didn't rise up against this, and eventually they started to, with the parents rising up against what they were doing to the kids.
Yeah.
So it was a matter of getting that information out, and they knew what to do. Anybody who was releasing this information or repeating this information, they became the guilty parties, and they had financial ruin. Some of them, they lose their jobs and reputation and all these things. So now it should get a little bit easier. But really the sad part is that they could get that far. That's how weak the understanding and the determination to defend our liberties had gotten to. The people. It wasn't just a couple people in the CIA.
Yeah.
I mean, there has to have been a lot of other people supporting it. And then, lo and behold, the philosophy has drifted into quite a few of our states. And the state officials, had governors that love the idea.
Yeah.
They'll just join in, and if we're going to skirt, blaming the federal government for it and blame it on corporations, the states just decided executive orders. I didn't know about all that stuff, and then they went to town. But right now, what I would say is this is information that needs to be out there, and people need to see what's going on. And the people who, spoke out early on and suffered the consequences, and there's more of that. People are starting to try to recognize the injustices that occurred.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna close with something, but I do want to do a shout out to James Cabral, a good friend of ours, great supporter. He chipped in $40 on a Rumble rant. He said, "Happy New Year, Dr. Paul, Daniel McAdams, our PLR staff. When the Libertarian Party asked on Twitter who the speaker should be, my votes were for Dr. Paul, Daniel McAdams, or Thomas Massey." Poor Thomas. So anyway, thanks for that. And I just want to close by mentioning, Dr. Paul, I think there's also some collateral damage on this. We know that McCarthy right now looks like kind of bruised goods. Let's put it that way. But I think Trump is also looking pretty bad, because he put out a full-throated endorsement of McCarthy last night. I don't know if we can find it back there. It's on his own channel. A full-throated endorsement of McCarthy, just as McCarthy was looking weakest. And the other point about that is that McCarthy has said some pretty nasty things about Trump in the past. He blamed him for January 6th. He said he was inciting people, and he also, back in 2016, if you remember, there was this hot mic conversation where McCarthy was talking to fellow Republicans, and he said, "There's two people, I think, that Putin pays, Rohrabacher and Trump." Laughter, laughter, swear to God. According to the transcript, Ryan immediately responded, "This is off the record," laughter, "no leaks," laughter, all right. So McCarthy has been anything but loyal to Trump. In fact, you could probably say he's a never-Trumper, yet he's gone all in for McCarthy. I think, Dr. Paul, I think it makes Trump look weak right now.
I wouldn't disagree with that, but I'm going to add something that might modify it a little bit. And that is that there's been a lot of exposure about the lies told with Russiagate, and also the computer gate that went on and how they covered up. I think that information doesn't hurt Trump because so much of that was used against him. But for various reasons, sometimes that information doesn't get out, and Donald Trump doesn't use it properly. But anyway, I keep thinking that anything that brings out the truth, let it fall. And but I think yours is the most immediate issue that went on. But have you finished up?
Yeah, I'm all done, yeah.
Okay, now I have something a little unusual because I have an announcement. You're the one that's so good with the announcement. But this is an announcement of something I'm going to attend. And I know a lot of people that view this program also are aware of it. And it's the 9th annual Anarchy meeting that they're having down in Acapulco. And that meeting is going to be held on the 5th to the 11th of February. A lot of activity going on. And I want to just announce where it is and what's going on. I'll be a speaker there. Beautiful tropical garden venue with 5 days and 6 nights of speakers, workshops, and nightlife. I'm not going to be at all those things, but I am going to be there. I'm going to be a speaker. So I wanted to let you know that is available. If you care, you could just go to anarchapulco.com. But I do want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and hopefully we provided some information you didn't have, and that you can see some positive things that may come of this. And I don't lie awake at nighttime worrying about, we don't have a speaker, we don't have a speaker. It's not necessary to do that, but it is worthwhile thinking about how you can best participate in making sure that we can get the best government. And the best government is those who are advocating less government and for the protection of our personal liberties, believing that peace and prosperity can be best achieved through that method. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.